The boardroom at Veltrix Dynamics gleamed under the late-morning California sun, all glass walls and polished wood reflecting the light. From my seat in the last row, I could see the entire length of the table where our executives and a handful of major investors leaned forward. Fixated on the giant LED screen at the front of the room, Clarissa Shaw stood there, immaculate in her navy blazer, her blonde bob unmoving as she gestured to the animated flow of robotic arms and conveyor belts. My creation, Mira, danced across the screen, simulating production lines with seamless efficiency. Our manufacturing-enhanced recursive algorithm, she said with the practiced confidence of a performer, will revolutionize how our clients respond to disruptions. Efficiency gains of 30% or more are projected across the first year alone. I knew every line of that script. I wrote the algorithms that powered those projections, trained the models on sleepless nights, and debugged the stubborn edge cases that could cripple the system. Yet, in Clarissa's voice, my work became her stage. My phone vibrated against my lap. I glanced down discreetly. Is this really your work? We should talk after this. The number was unfamiliar, but the name in the corner, Janet Frey. CTO made my pulse flicker for half a second. Then I felt the smile tug at the corner of my mouth. Someone on the inside saw through the performance. On the screen, Clarissa advanced to the slide I had designed 6 months ago, full of process flow diagrams and bold efficiency targets. Investors nodded. Marcus Velton, our CEO, tapped his pen thoughtfully on the table. Clarissa thrived on that attention, her voice ringing with a certainty she hadn't earned. I settled into the chair, arms crossed lightly, letting the faint smile linger. I didn't need to interrupt. I didn't need to speak. In 15 minutes, the live demonstration would begin. I had watched Clarissa prepare for it all week, brushing off the testing scenarios I'd quietly flagged months ago. There was no malice in my inaction, just inevitability. She built her castle on a hollow foundation, brick by brick. And today she would walk across it for everyone to see. I drew a slow breath, eyes flicking to the digital clock on the wall. 15 minutes. That was all it would take for everything Clarissa thought she owned to start unraveling. 6 months earlier. The Veltrix Tech Lab hummed with the steady rhythm of servers and cooling fans. I sat surrounded by screens displaying production metrics from our largest clients' colored charts, fluctuating numbers, and endless lines of logs that most people would find mind-numbing. To me, they were a puzzle waiting to be solved. Every few weeks, another client called with the same complaint: your system works, but it doesn't adapt fast enough when something changes. Machines stalled if a supplier was late, production halted over minor variable shifts, and human managers had to intervene constantly. That afternoon, staring at a wall of inefficiencies, the idea struck me. What if the AI didn't just follow rules we gave it, but learned to identify bottlenecks and adapt on its own? A system that could see problems before we did and redesign itself in real time. I spent the night drafting the proposal and sent it to Marcus Velton, our CEO, and Janet Frey, our CTO, by the next morning. They had both summoned me to the executive conference room. This, Marcus said, leaning back with his pen tapping against the folder, could change everything for our industrial clients. Janet's eyes were sharp with interest. If you can get a proof of concept in 3 months and a working prototype in 6, we'll give you whatever resources you need. In the end, whatever resources meant 2 junior engineers, one of them Raj Patel, fresh out of grad school with more energy than experience. Still, I didn't care. I finally had a chance to build the kind of system I'd always dreamed about. That was the first time Clarissa Shaw appeared at my desk. Freshly shifted from marketing to operations, she leaned on the divider with a bright, rehearsed smile. I'll help translate your genius for the executives. We'll be a great team. I nodded, distracted by my sketches and code notes, barely noticing the way her eyes lit up when Marcus mentioned the phrase high visibility project. At that moment, all I could think about was Mary's potential, unaware of the shadow that had just stepped into my work. By the next week, she was already sitting in my first project meeting, 2 months into Mara's development. We hit the kind of breakthrough engineers dream about after weeks of trial and error. I managed to implement a form of transfer learning that let the system apply insights from one factory to another without retraining from scratch. Watching the simulation adapt between 2 completely different production setups felt like watching a child take its first steps. I emailed Marcus and Janet immediately, and a meeting was scheduled for the next morning. I arrived early, laptop in hand, ready to walk them through the results. To my surprise, Clarissa was already there, seated beside Marcus, her tablet open like she owned the place. "Hope you don't mind," she said with a casual shrug. "I just wanted to stay up to date on our project." I forced a polite smile and began my presentation. But before I could get to the key point, Clarissa jumped in. "We've developed a way for Mara to adapt across different factory types," she said, gesturing to my slides as if she had built them herself. "This cross-environment learning is going to be huge for scalability." I paused, stunned. While Marcus and Janet nodded approvingly, I finished the demo, but the words caught in my throat every time she said "we" that afternoon. A company-wide email hit my inbox. Clarissa Shaw leads Veltrix's groundbreaking self-learning AI project. The accompanying newsletter article had a photo of Clarissa in the lab, leaning over a monitor I had set up. My name was nowhere to be found. Confusion burned into hurt, and hurt hardened into cold realization. This wasn't an accident. Clarissa wasn't just helping. She was laying claim to everything I had built. That night, I opened my laptop and started quietly saving every commit log, email, and design document to a secure folder. I began a meticulous record of my work dates, times, and contributions that couldn't be erased. It hit me that in this place, perception mattered more than reality, and right now, I was losing. By the next week, Clarissa had invited herself into every meeting, and my gut told me this was only the beginning. By the 3rd month of Mara's development, it felt as if I was slowly disappearing from my own project. Invitations to meetings that I had once led stopped arriving in my inbox. When I checked the shared project calendar, I saw strategy sessions and executive briefings marked internal, organized by Clarissa. Even the emails about Mira changed. I used to be listed as the primary contact. Now, every update started with "from Clarissa Shaw," while my name sat quietly in the CC line, as if I were an observer instead of the engineer who had built the system from the ground up. The final insult came one late night in my San Jose apartment. I was curled up on my couch with my laptop, the glow of the city spilling in through the window. When I clicked on a link to an industry blog, the headline stopped me cold. Clarissa Shaw and her team pioneer self-learning manufacturing AI at Veltrix Dynamics. The article featured a glossy photo of her standing in the lab, leaning over a workstation I had configured. With my monitors and my code in the background, her quotes spoke about leading innovation and driving a revolutionary approach to adaptive manufacturing. There was no mention of me or my team. Sadness sank into my chest, heavy and hot. For a moment, I thought about walking into HR the next morning and unloading everything, but then I opened a recent internal report for the project and froze. My title had been replaced Primary Developer, Management Team Oversight. My name had been shifted into a secondary line, as if I were a consultant instead of the architect. That was the moment the sadness burned away. I stared at the line, felt the betrayal harden into something colder and sharper. No more complaints. No more begging for recognition. If Clarissa wanted to build her throne on lies, I would let her sit on it until the day it collapsed. From that night forward, I stopped thinking like a loyal employee and started thinking like someone planning her quiet escape. The more I observed Mara's progress from the shadows, the clearer its weakness became. Hidden beneath the glossy performance metrics was a flaw that could bring the whole system down. In scenarios where raw materials dropped by half or more, Mira's decision tree spiraled out of control, trying to recalculate too many variables at once. Instead of adapting, it froze. Clarissa never noticed. She was too busy rehearsing her board presentations and giving interviews, polishing her narrative of leadership. She didn't ask for stress tests. She didn't want real engineering. She wanted applause. One evening, as I documented the flaw in my private logs, a new email pinged my inbox from an unrecognizable address. "Stay quiet, or your career is over." I stared at the screen, heart thudding. It didn't take a genius to guess who sent it, or at least who wanted me to believe it came from them. I closed my laptop slowly, fear curling in my stomach. But the fear didn't last. By the time I turned off the light, it had hardened into resolve. The next morning, I filed paperwork for Iron Willow Systems LLC. I found a small office across downtown San Jose with peeling white paint and one window overlooking a parking lot. It didn't matter. It was mine. Every night and weekend, I built Mira 2.0 from scratch. No Veltrix servers, no company resources, a system that fixed the flaw, scaled faster, and adapted beyond manufacturing into any process I chose. I recorded everything screen captures, notarized notebooks, video logs of my coding sessions. If Veltrix ever tried to claim my work, the proof of independence would be irrefutable. Exhaustion became routine, but so did the quiet thrill of freedom. For the first time in months, I wasn't just defending myself, I was creating something untouchable. By the time Clarissa scheduled her grand boardroom demo, my version of Mira was alive, learning and waiting. The boardroom buzzed with quiet anticipation as Clarissa launched the high-stakes demo. Sunlight poured through the panoramic windows, washing the polished wood table in gold, while the massive LED screen displayed Mira's simulated production floor. Robotic arms moved in synchronized precision, conveyor belts shifted, and data streams pulsed across the screen in crisp graphics. "At Veltrix Dynamics," Clarissa said, voice smooth and confident, "we've created an AI that adapts to any manufacturing disruption, ensuring efficiency no human team could achieve." Cameras clicked as an investor leaned forward to take a photo. The simulation responded perfectly at first, adjusting conveyor speeds and reallocating tasks. My heart remained calm. I had already tested this sequence 100 times across the table. Marcus Velton's eyes flicked to me in the back row. His expression was unreadable, but the slight lift of one brow made my pulse slow even further. He suspected something. Maybe not everything, but enough to watch me instead of the screen. Clarissa continued her narration, her tone climbing with each impressive adjustment Mara performed. Then in the top right corner of the interface, a faint red warning appeared. I saw it instantly. Clarissa didn't. The warning blinked, then disappeared, replaced by a second error message half a minute later. The system was beginning to strain. I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. My heartbeat was steady, almost slow, as the tension in the room remained invisible to everyone but me. On screen, a third alert joined the others, this one flashing before fading into the background log. Clarissa carried on, gesturing toward a bar graph climbing with projected efficiency gains. I could feel the shift in the air, subtle but certain. The system was approaching the point where reality would pierce through her story, and no polished narrative could cover the crack when it finally split wide open. I exhaled quietly and watched the countdown begin in my head, knowing the performance had only minutes left before the truth made its entrance. The first loud alarm shattered the boardroom's calm like a dropped glass. On the screen, the neat visualization of Mira's simulated factory shuddered, then froze. A half-dozen red warnings exploded across the interface, filling every corner with urgent error codes. Clarissa froze for half a beat, her polished presentation script colliding with the chaos in front of her. "This is just a minor glitch," she stammered, forcing a tight smile. Her fingers flew across the control console, trying to reset the scenario. Nothing happened. The frozen image of robotic arms and conveyor belts was punctuated by an insistent beeping that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. A murmur rippled through the room. Investors leaned toward one another, whispering, and one of the board members shook his head. A second later, the entire interface crashed to black, replaced by the company logo and a single blinking error prompt. The silence was heavier than the alarm had been. Marcus Velton's chair scraped back as he rose, his voice steady but sharp. "Call Elena, now." Clarissa's face lost all its color as her gaze swept the room, landing on me in the back row. For the first time in months, her voice had no authority, only desperation. "Please, can you fix this?" I stood slowly, letting the weight of the room settle on my shoulders, and met her eyes. My voice was calm, almost soft, but carried to every corner of the boardroom. "You're the project lead," I said evenly. "I'm sure your team can handle it." Dozens of eyes followed me as I picked up my bag and walked down the aisle. I didn't hurry, didn't look back, didn't acknowledge the soft chaos blooming behind me, Clarissa muttering excuses, Marcus calling for IT, investors shaking their heads. By the time the elevator doors slid closed, cutting off the muffled voices above, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a clean, unburdened freedom. I stepped into the bright San Jose afternoon, the hum of the city replacing the boardroom's tension, already thinking of the office across town where my real work and my real future waited for me. The next afternoon, I stepped into the sleek glass offices of Renrick's Technologies in Palo Alto. The lobby gleamed with polished stone and soft lighting, a quiet hum of servers somewhere beyond the walls. A receptionist led me to a conference room where a wall of screens faced a long table of brushed steel and glass. Daniel Chen, Renrick's CTO, rose to greet me. He was younger than I expected, wearing a casual gray blazer and a sharp, curious expression. "Elena Marescal," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I've heard whispers about your work. Let's see what you've built." I powered up my laptop and connected to the displays. Mira 2.0's interface bloomed across the screens, crisp and fluid. Unlike the Veltrix version, this one carried a quiet confidence it was mine from the ground up. No shortcuts, no compromises. I began the demo with a standard scenario, then moved into the extremes, sudden 50% raw material cuts, multiple production line failures, simultaneous changes in demand, on screen. The system adapted without hesitation, reconfiguring resource allocation and maintaining output. Every warning that would have crippled Veltrix's Mira was anticipated, solved, or bypassed entirely. Daniel leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. "This isn't just technology," he said slowly. "It's a revolution." A warmth spread through me, vindication, empowerment, and the sharp relief of being truly seen. For months, I'd been a ghost in my own achievements. Now, every calculation, every elegant line of code, every late night was shining in the light it deserved. He asked questions about scalability, cross-industry application, and long-term support. I answered confidently, showing how Mira 2.0 could adapt to healthcare logistics, energy distribution, even urban traffic flow. The possibilities spread across the screens like a living map of the future. By the end of the hour, Daniel leaned back, smiling. I think we're looking at the start of something extraordinary. I closed my laptop, feeling the weight of months lift off my shoulders. For the first time since Clarissa had stepped into my world, I wasn't just defending myself, I was building forward, and no one could take this from me. The news broke 3 days after my meeting with Daniel Chen. Veltrix Dynamics' flagship AI project had been quietly canceled following a disastrous board demonstration. Industry blogs were calling it a critical failure, and the financial press reported a sharp drop in Veltrix's stock price. Investors were furious. By the end of the week, Clarissa Shaw's name disappeared from the company directory. A brief, sanitized press release called it a leadership transition. But the rumor mill didn't hold back. She had been escorted out. After the internal review revealed how little she understood the system she claimed to lead. I sat by the window of my new apartment, floor-to-ceiling glass framing the San Jose skyline. A mug of coffee warm in my hands. The city lights shimmered below, and for the first time in months, the tension in my chest had dissolved into quiet satisfaction. That evening, a new email slid into my inbox. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Elena, we can still fix this together. I'll share credit. Please. The words were almost pitiful, heavy with the kind of desperation that comes only when a person realizes they've built their life on borrowed ground. I stared at it for a moment, letting the weight of it settle in. Then I dragged the email into the trash. No reply, no hesitation. I leaned back into the couch, letting the glow of the city fill the silence. Clarissa's career had crumbled. Veltrix was scrambling to recover, and I was free. My victory didn't need to be loud. It lived in the quiet, in the knowledge that I had taken back control without lowering myself to her game. Outside, the skyline seemed sharper, clearer, as if the city itself had shifted into focus. And as my phone buzzed with a notification from Daniel about the next steps for our partnership, I felt a deeper pull toward the future that was already waiting for me. Months later, I stood on the stage of an industry conference in San Francisco, facing a packed auditorium of engineers, executives, and investors. The massive screens behind me displayed Mira 2, Zero running in real time across factories in 3 different countries. Metrics scrolled upward, energy saved, waste reduced, productivity boosted. Every number was proof that the system worked and that it was mine. Applause swelled as I concluded my presentation with the latest results from our global implementations. Renrix had partnered with Iron Willow Systems to roll out Mira 2.0 across manufacturing, logistics, and even energy sectors. What started as a quiet rebellion in a rented office had become a recognized force in the industry. As I stepped off the stage and into the mingling crowd, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Clarissa Shaw stood near the back of the hall, holding a tablet with a small startup logo on its cover. She looked smaller than I remembered, her posture careful, her expression hesitant. She approached slowly, weaving through clusters of attendees until she was standing just a few feet away. Her voice was quiet, stripped of the sharpness it once carried. "Congratulations," she said, eyes lowered for a moment before meeting mine. "I understand now what I lost." I let a calm smile settle on my face. "The most valuable thing I learned wasn't coding," I said evenly. "It was knowing the difference between looking successful and being successful." For a moment, she nodded, almost grateful, then turned back toward the crowd. I watched her disappear into the sea of conference attendees, a chapter of my life finally closing without bitterness or triumph, shouted aloud. I turned back to the hall, to the conversations waiting for me, to the future I had built on my own terms, in that quiet moment. With the hum of voices around me and Mira 2.0 lighting up screens across the globe, I felt something deeper than victory, the unshakable certainty that I had taken my life back and no one could touch it again.